episode is sponsored by Raise Tech, end-to-end IT solutions for your business growth.
This episode was hosted at Rocket Software Space. Modernization without disruption.
Hello everybody, welcome on the Agile Couch. Today with us we have Jovirdas. Hi Jovirdas.
Hi Simai.
And Jovirdas is an experienced engineering director working a lot these days with cloud platforms. Jovirdas working is right now, if not mistaken, in Sendcloud.
Yes, that's correct.
As head of platform.
Yes, that's the formal title.
That's the formal title, of course. And I think Jovirdas has lots of experience over his career working within different companies, organizations, helping to build the teams, build the engineering setup, as well as to run the business for the companies. So I've been in various different positions and roles overall. Yeah,
you have some gray hair already.
Of course, that's not that visible through the camera.
Okay,
so it's all fine. But today with Jovirdas, we met to dig deeper a bit and discuss around autonomy, as autonomy is usually something that many organizations want, to have great autonomous teams. But at the same time, with autonomy, you can get lots of different challenges and things that not necessarily always helps. So we met today just to discuss around this, share different experiences, and Jovirdas has many things to share as well, I'm sure, for this experience. Therefore we'll chat and talking about autonomy in general. Why I think autonomy is so much wanted thing, like all the companies seems like they're seeking, let's have autonomous teams, let's have autonomy, and teams want to be autonomous. Why is that? Why it is that everyone wants autonomy?
In my view, at least, it seems to be like the main driver is to enhance the speed of delivery and not to have blockers, not to be dependent on someone. So especially if it is more like about the product development and feature development, as we usually say, it's exactly autonomy is being perceived as something that we can provide you higher velocity, higher speed, delivering features faster, getting more like dependencies on one team rather than just on multiple ones and so on. So at least I believe that's one of the main drivers or expectations. Of course, there are more like things, but in my view, that's usually mainly the speed of the delivery.
The speed. Yeah, I agree that for organizations, it's most likely the speed. But if we would take it from teams' perspective, why teams want to be autonomous, and they usually say, we don't have enough freedom, there is a structure, someone is not allowing us. Why it is good for the teams, or why teams do find it attractive?
Again, it's most likely dependent on also different teams and different maturity of the teams. I am more of a believer that it's about also the ownership. So if the team can own the things and be responsible and accountable for the things that are being delivered by the team, that is also another maybe ingredient outlining the requirement for autonomy and to have that decision-making power, the direction, and other things. So at least to me, it seems that usually teams want to have their clear view of what we want to achieve and to be in their hands on what we need to deliver. And then usually a lot of gray area between that white expectation and maybe also some of the horror stories sometimes which might end up with that autonomy. So it's not like only black and white, it's most likely just different shades of gray.
Yeah, indeed, I completely agree. And talking about autonomy, the fun fact is that I was as well a bit researching what do we have about autonomy just on the internet, what are the articles about and different things. So it's like majority of the things are written about how autonomy is great and how it helps, but it's very rarely visible what are the challenges that autonomy brings by itself. And actually that's quite interesting, because everyone seems like we're seeking for autonomy. We want autonomous teams, we want self-organized teams, we want the teams that has ownership, we want teams that can make quick decisions and deliver fast, but at the same time, what's the price of it, so to say, what you can get out of it, and when autonomy actually hurts. So just from your perspective, what is the, I don't know, most recent or the oldest memory that you have around autonomy within organizations, or what challenges it might create.
Yeah, I think you are right, Sime. So usually it's more like also like having an advertisement of some product being advertised. So autonomy is also quite powerful marketing term, I would say. And it's not that I don't believe in that. I also believe autonomy is great. It just has a lot of different strings attached, or maybe asterisks is added, like, additional terms and conditions. So if we start more like from individual team member, like you initially mentioned, or like team itself, it's pretty clear, that teams or individuals want to have the decision power. All of us usually, consider our freedom when we can, be in charge of our like direction or goals or destiny, if we even can go wider. However, at least also based on my maybe experience working in different teams, different organizations, and also different level of maturity in organization, you don't have those teams and autonomy in vacuum. So it's more like that. It's not only one team being autonomous, it's multiple teams. Additional things also depend on how organization is doing, how big the teams are, what are their goals and drivers of the organization. Is this organization in startup, scale up, or like already well-established company phase, and so on. So all those things contribute to what autonomy means, and sometimes it is more maybe an ingredient to the success story. Sometimes it might end up also a bit of the challenging story. However, it's not about autonomy per se. It's more like exactly, so what is the environment? What is the context? What is the maturity even of the team members, right? What is the maturity of the managers and all the things, right? So if you just would read autonomy by means of theoretical terms, it really is appealing, while maybe implementation in reality is exactly that makes it much more interesting and enjoyable, challenging, whatever you will name.
Practical over theoretical view, and but from practical view, then everyone wants to have autonomy. As I said, it really depends what autonomy means within different environments, and more mature organizations naturally, I assume now, might have a more chances to have a better outcomes of autonomy, while more less mature organizations, they probably have more challenges having that autonomy. As you mentioned, there are multiple teams, and those teams most likely need to do something together to achieve joint effort within the product. So what's usually not that nice or not working that well, if there are two teams, those two teams are working independently with each other. They are not even collaborating, so to say, or they are collaborating, but there are two environments of autonomy.
Yeah, so in like very distilled case, that would be exactly the picture. However, what I usually also want to mention, and also especially where maybe also to some extent platform teams also come into the play, it's more that those multiple autonomous teams have still some questions related to the features or like the service or product they do own. So it's more like, what about the scalability requirements? What is about the maybe, operational excellence? What are our support terms? What are our maybe SLAs for one or another part? And especially if as an umbrella is company which is offering that outcome of those autonomous teams that they deliver and result to some customers, I don't know if you can expect that based on the different features companies providing very different kind and type of product and conditions to the customers, right? So it's not like necessarily saying, oh, this team autonomous, they don't, for example, don't have enough experience in incident management or change management. So that means they will cover that at some level. Another team might be more experienced, right? And maybe will add more like emphasis on that part. Other things that are coming for cost efficiency and other like, improvements and so on. These are the questions which usually you need to address, or at least, to get there with the teams together. And again, like I mentioned, it depends also what are the experiences of the team members, right? So if you have also the team members definitely also having a big initiative, right? Will to deliver. However, if there are also some misalignments or maybe not covered, not answered topics by the company itself, but maybe left for the teams. So it's exactly what does it mean, definition of done, right? So what is our appropriate speed of the delivery? How do we align And even, which is usually much more challenging, especially if the company is creating the autonomous team, but the product itself is still maybe bundled together and features are connected by means of different dependencies, so we can call it monolith architecture part. That is another ingredient, which I would say, you can have autonomous teams, but if you have some monolithic dependency where all the features and everything still are connected, you cannot really have that full autonomy just because you are still dependent maybe on the system architecture, what you have, and so on. So these are different ingredients, right? Like I say, it depends on case-by-case basis. So I'm not saying that there is like a silver bullet or holy grail to make that part, autonomy completely successful, or what is the definition, of successful autonomy. These are more like evolutionary items, at least in my perception.
In your experience. Yeah. But I completely agree. And one of the things you mentioned is, as an example, reliability, or one team has more experience handling, working with incident management, resolution, one team has more, other team has less. And at the end, so we are doing it differently. It means that one part might be not that reliable, and the other part can be much in a better position and shape. But that's the challenge. We cannot have just one part running probably properly and the other one.
Unless it is officially stated by means of the strategy of the company, right? So of course, in theory, at least I haven't seen that in practice, right? But in theory, you can say that company can say, okay, our feature or service A is much more important, right? And that takes, all the priorities and precedence, and everyone
and we don't care about service B.
And others as long as we run, that's good enough, right? However, usually, if it is the situation when there is a question, do you need that secondary or like not mandatory feature and other things, right? And another part is always like continuous discussions on the priorities and alignment, right? So product versus technical part, right? So product and feature driven organization is usually oriented into the execution and the speed of execution, while
that's
maybe
natural.
Primarily if you are in scale up phase, it's more like already maturing your frameworks, processes, or guidelines, if we don't want to go into the completely bureaucratic sound of the processes, but it's still like alignment and what do we expect for all the teams to have there, and also ending up also to what level autonomy still benefits company, because you can have completely autonomous teams even by means of maybe change management, and even saying you can evolve, every team can be completely evolving on all those processes, but then usually comes the question, at what cost, right? So what is the cost of similar, right? And does it contribute to the value driven organizational goals, or is it more like that we can do it but not necessarily again being in the most efficient way? So usually, at least in my experience, that moment comes also in the company, right? So once you are maybe in the very early stage, you can do whatever freestyle because you want to deliver features and maybe to attract and to be visible in the market. However, once you already got that part, right, and attention of the market players, the bigger your clients are, usually the bigger the requirements come, right? And then into the play comes also security items, which probably everyone is aware, especially in the products offered, to the external companies and especially SaaS offerings. So all those things right now, again, security, scalability, reliability, and so on, gets into the formula, and then it raises the question, so what would be the best one for the company to do? However, usually it's not something you can leave behind and to say, oh, let's ignore it for another year or so.
That may be a huge cost, as you said, because if we're already starting up and teams do not care and we don't care, there is no alignment on that part, and might be huge losses and big disasters. But reliability, scalability, you mentioned security. So for sure, alignment probably, or not alignment, autonomy does not necessarily mean always that we can leave these parts aside and say for each team or for each part of the organization you decide. There needs to be some kind of alignment. That's what you probably mean by saying that.
Yeah, so autonomy at one or another level, right? Or maybe guidelines agreed, to all the teams, right, across organizations. Sometimes some of the companies have more like principal engineer like chapters, or like architectural, let's call it boards, right, that also drive some of the direction across all the teams.
Alignment,
to align or to follow and so on. And that's another also ingredient into that formula and recipe, right? So if you don't have good alignment maybe at the higher level across all the technical engineering teams, and you leave it completely unmonitored or unowned, that usually is a big challenge for all the autonomous teams to align across all the remit, just because those teams are oriented usually in the feature deliveries, right? So it's not necessarily even enough experience, neither even appetite, to do all that, let's say, alignment, commoditization across different teams and other things. So it's a bit of also maybe backfiring that autonomy level, right? If you expect then, good alignment across everyone. So then it's also the question is at what level it happens, right? So are you like completely in freestyle, expecting that at some point all the teams will come to the same synchronization, or maybe, company needs to have some kind of
structured direction,
synchronization clock, right, and frequency, to be introduced across all the teams, so mainly just teams can get into that sequence and to have the same frequency on the deliveries, or maybe on the things they do things, and maybe priorities and other like matters.
Talking about synchronization, I just remembered one of the recent cases I've seen, which is quite funny, but at the same time maybe a good example of what autonomy could cause. So in terms of synchronization, you mentioned, let's say there are a number of teams within an organization. They're quite autonomous. They have all the freedom and they can do whatever they need to deliver the product, because company is product focused. That's completely fine. But at the end, what happens that there are different technologies being used across, not completely different, but at least some of the frameworks within the technologies. And the other part, which is more funny probably, different CI/CD tooling to run the product, to deploy the product, which then it creates a lot of chaos. We need to support all of these toolings, even though the beginning teams build those, but then someone needs to support. And let's say usually it's somewhere between the DevOps engineers, and in the engineering teams, but it makes lots of challenges. Like each tool is different, the setup is different for such a small scale, couple of teams.
Yeah, that's more like, maybe as I call it, a bit of the horror stories or side tracks, and similar one. And even when you are mentioning DevOps team or SRE team, right? It's also like, in my view, very important also to ensure if you are moving into the autonomous teams and like feature autonomy direction. Also, it's very important then to ensure that ownership and accountability within the remit of that team, right? So it's more like, it is called single-threaded ownership. So I personally don't really believe in the model that you have autonomous teams that maybe develop business feature, right, or like product. However, then for supporting all the other things, right, it's like you have some other teams. Sometimes it gets into some organizations like, we have DevOps layer, or maybe like a SRE layer, which is more like horizontal layer across, right? So it's more like perceived to have the teams which will bring order. I don't think, maybe in my career, it was no successful implementation, if I might call it this way, right, of that model. Just because then usually it raises the question to what level you have an ownership and accountability, if it is more like an autonomous feature delivery, versus again, some of the gatekeepers protecting, let's say, production, right? And for you also having some, I don't know, operational readiness and other things, right? But then again, it breaks the autonomy part, because we started originally, right? Maybe the main driver for autonomous teams is the speed of delivery. However, if you end up with a speed of delivery to some extent, right, but when you cannot release something into the production just because you introduced some stage gates, that's, again, in my view, like negative, or like not necessarily the right path, to end up. And then again raises the question, right, so how we still align across the teams, give that autonomy to the teams, however, maybe with some, let's say, rules of the game introduced still across the company, right, or at least, saying this is like, everyone needs to follow. So be it like CI/CD tooling, right, and other like standardized things that, again, it's the same, can be about, where do you keep your repositories, right? Is it GitLab, GitHub, or similar, like, things?
Such
and
a
also
small things, but makes a huge difference.
Independently we are going, right? So it's still more like maybe a alignment, and it comes not only because of it being more efficient. Again, it's about cost, right? So maintaining multiple systems, paying for multiple systems, maybe at individual team level it's not visible, but usually then on the organizational level, or at least at the technology organization level, you usually also then see that very obviously, right? The costs where you then say, okay, are we cost efficient, right? How can we do still things, still not necessarily blocking the teams, however, at the same time keeping in mind that it's also about maybe the cost, right? along the maybe speed
Yeah.
and autonomy.
Yeah, within those small pockets, as you mentioned, the autonomy or the inefficiencies and the cost might not be that visible. Well, then someone looking broader perspective might see, oh, we are in a really crappy situation and what we could do about it. So it's about that alignment and direction. And you mentioned an example. There's a term: you build it, you own it. But there's something we discussed sometime previously about short-lived teams. What's your experience within short-lived teams and having that autonomy? Because it's really attractive, it's sexy, because I can do whatever I want to, or I can join the team that is building something really nice, but it's just for a short term, for that mission or project.
Okay, yeah, so this one is also like very, very appealing, and at the same time also like a bit of the luring topic, I would say, right? So the main question, even if you have mission or project or delivery team, is, are we clear who will be owner of that, product or final result one another team is delivering? And if the question is more like, at the organizational level, at the team level, we don't know who will own it, but now we know that we still need, to develop something and to build it, right? Yeah, so it will be another stage, right? So it's more like, saying, oh, now we are more maybe in the design and build and maybe delivery phase, right? And then we will see someone, some team or whoever else, right, will be responsible, like, polishing it up, making it, scalable to the level it is expected for customers and other things. So if it is this way, I'm really skeptical about the success or efficiency of similar product, because usually the assumption that some team will own it ends up that some team says, no, we don't think we can own it, or we don't know, we haven't built that product and other things. So from one perspective, I'm more like a supporter, like at least understand the direction that you can have mission team, but if mission teams builds that product, most likely maybe that mission team then turns into the, let's say, product team, or even if it is like, mission being, maybe providing some standardized product or service across all multiple teams, maybe this team can turn into some platform team offering the service to internal teams. Or maybe that mission team can be more like a subset of a particular product or service team, which already knows that they are going to own it, but maybe for that delivery, you need some more versatile team, right? Of maybe multiple qualifications which you don't have right now within the team, but once delivered, it's clear that you are going to disband that team, and it will, blend again into the permanent maybe activities and the landscape. However, I'm also very skeptical about maybe temporary teams like mission teams being constructed of the teams which are more like permanent. So permanent mission teams, right? So it's more like, the same subset of the people saying we are a mission team, and now we are exactly the same subset of the people delivering one mission, and when we are going to deliver another mission. So mainly,
just
as I say, you have more like, but when you have more like, the team which is primarily concentrated only on missions, and it's usually the same DNA, the same size of the team and other things, which is more like, that you have permanent team for the temporary cause, then again, it usually raises the question, so is similar mission team then the owner? And accountability level for the success of the product, is it mainly measured only, to the speed of the delivery, or how you then ensure, again, that single-threaded maybe ownership, making the product or service which was delivered as a success? I'm not saying it's not possible, but I would say there are multiple question marks. What is the definition then, right? At least again, in my experience, usually this is more like that tiny line which breaks that, maybe sometimes the illusion, right? That mission delivery was already that we delivered some product, and then, that, I don't know, profitability of that product, or even, usability of that product is question, for other teams to answer.
But it's
usually very hard.
It's not fair at the same time. And what's important, then it requires really handovers. And what handovers, why they are not good? Because you cannot cover everything, and there will be situations where someone will need to help to resolve. And if we have those, that's the problem. Probably that needs to be resolved or thought of before going in there, rather than left at the end. That's what
at least being very clear, right? And it's also, we don't need, again, forget also the motivation of the people. Of course, everyone, or maybe I believe, majority of the people are interested, and engineers primarily go into the difficult, complicated technical solutions, right? And more like, concentrating more on the technical difficulty, right, and challenges, right? And again, when the question comes, if you have within organization permanent similar mission team, which always gets those, let's say, interesting deliveries, right? What is the perception of other team members who are working maybe in different teams and they are not part of that so-called permanent mission team? So it's again, the question is, so how to keep also the motivation, contribution, and the best knowledge and competency sharing on the deliveries. I am more like of the advocate saying that when you need to gather then the best for that particular mission, people from different teams for that temporary delivery, of course, being sure, like I mentioned earlier, how it is being owned, who is owned, and so on. And then maybe having the best of the best you can get for the delivery, ensuring the product is as good as it is, but not necessarily depending just on so-called special team, right? Or SWAT team, which is always the same one, right? So you can have SWAT teams, but this also, in my belief, needs to be also temporary teams, right? SWAT team can also be gathered based on the specific requirements, not always saying that we have so much universal team members who can deliver whatever you would come with. It's more like what you need in order to make that effective and efficient.
Yeah. The more autonomy you give, probably within that perspective, the more challenges it might bring, and that alignment up front is probably crucial, because otherwise, at the end, there will be a house. Who will own how it will look like? But autonomy, from what you've mentioned over this couple of minutes already, what I've heard, it's all about as well. How are we aligned? What's the direction? Do we have the needed skill set? What's the maturity of the teams, organizations? So it's not just autonomy as itself. There are lots of different parameters within the function that you need to think of, how these small things will actually impact the end of this equation, whether we are autonomous or not.
It's exactly, at least this is how I see it. So it depends on the much bigger subset of the different variables, like you mentioned, and it's just stating, autonomous teams are always going to shine, right? Or it is like, the direction for success and other things. If it is not clear, at what point of organizational life or development phase, and what kind of the team members you have, what is also the competencies, it like very young team, with maybe majority of the team members who are maybe in their first employment in your company, right? And maybe we still need a bit of more experience and other things, to be efficient, because also we need to be effective and working shoulder to shoulder with each other, right? And again, maybe you are depending sometimes on the external resources, right? Like contractors, freelancers, which is also makes it even more challenging, I believe, in quite a few cases. That part, especially if organization is not providing that gluing piece of what you expect.
Absolutely.
So these are the parts, like so it's exactly, if you would say autonomous teams in vacuum, the critical ingredient for success, I would say, no, it depends, right? It might be, it might not. Again, is there some universal rule you would say, please follow A, B, C, D, and you will get that, always successful? I also not the one who believes in that. It's more like about, so what is exactly the situation? What do we have there? What are the challenges? And exactly those different things, right? Alignment across different teams. Do you have maybe a good maybe platform guidance, right? And the agreement, on the ownership. What is the expectation of the company goals, right? Is it primarily still being fast, right? Is it still more like maybe getting into more reliable stage? So it's all those things matter, and I think that when every company develops its own path to success. However, I still, as well, I need to repeat it, I do believe in autonomy, right? So it's not for me saying, autonomy will not work. I'm just saying that
it might hurt.
So sometimes that autonomy backfires in unexpected ways, especially if you haven't foreseen or haven't maybe invested enough time for the cross-functional alignment in the organization, right? So if that autonomy would be, let's do a freestyle, each team can go whatever we want. At some point, it still gets to the topics, right? Maybe it's not efficient enough. Look, it's not maybe maintainable enough. Look, it's too buggy. Look, the feedback from customers is not as you've been expecting. Look, it doesn't serve the purpose because maybe we have forgotten something which was more like naturally maybe assumed, but in reality it was not the case.
We haven't checked that. But what comes to my mind regarding autonomy, there is a saying, with more power you get, as well more responsibility. And the same is here. Probably the more freedom you feel you have in terms of autonomy of how you work, what tooling you use, what's the approaches, more probably you need to be responsible. And that comes back to the things that you mentioned at the beginning. It's all about maturity. So probably what my assumption right now, I wonder what you think. I believe that if they're a really mature team, if there is one at least mature team within the organization, that team could have more autonomy compared to what others might need at the moment, because they will think about much more different things, perspectives, how their actions are impacting others, the whole organization. So probably as well, it is not like you cannot measure autonomy, of course, that easily, but within different teams, there will be different levels of autonomy that teams can get as it grows with their maturity naturally. Probably there's more confidence from leadership within the teams. The skill set are being as well developed, so it's not as well straightforward to have the same line of autonomy across all the organization. Or do you see it somehow?
Yes, to some extent, if we are especially more like, talking about more like feature teams, like, and we want like, getting that autonomy level, and maybe each of those teams, having their cycle, then I still would see, at least, something, be it like the organizational, more like, technology, architecture, like system, or maybe platform alignment, which is more like a bit of the keeping the pace, what is the bare minimum for you to have, right? I don't necessarily see that option very easily, saying, oh, one team is completely in house mode, right? Only like, trying to form the team, and, everyone is not aware how to do it. And we have another team, which is like almost nirvana state, right? Completely autonomous, but very mature, with well-developed, alignment processes or guidelines and everything, right? And you have exactly that huge delta, like, there. So it's more like then about the question, so what is your, at least, baseline that you believe you would need to reach? Again, this baseline is not necessarily also pushing, that most advanced team down, but at least, ensuring what is the bare minimum, right? So, and this bare minimum, maybe it can be the options coming, from having also platform teams, or like, gluing that together. But it also comes even in the platform perspective, by the way, right? I don't believe in complete autonomy, especially of the platform teams, because platform teams, again, in my view and also in my experience, are the ones who need to help and develop and accelerate what those feature teams need.
They set some kind of baseline, so to say.
Yeah, so
it's very
or maybe it's having
to...
a common ground across different teams. However, it's not. I think it's especially dangerous, right? If you would get extremely autonomous platform teams, that would be even much more
I would imagine.
Bigger impact, in a negative manner, I think, within organization, because the platform is, of course, my maybe remit, right? And other things. So this is where I see also platform is exactly more like, to glue the things together. So if the gluing part goes completely, sideways, then you have nothing to glue, because, there is no one like, who trusts or believes your glues. Like, and if you just say, oh no, we are maybe much more mature, you don't understand what you need, or similar ones, that usually even creates a bigger challenges, right? When also feature teams might say, yeah, but when we don't think that we need what you are delivering, be it for different reasons. Is it because, like, it doesn't serve the purpose, or you can call it, oh, maybe you will realize that in 1 year. I don't believe in such things, like, saying, you don't know what you need, I will give you, right? So if there is no, like I say, need for your solution, and it's not clear why one or another team needs something to be delivered, you can deliver masterpieces, but if there is no demand even in the market, right? Even not in the companies, right? Sometimes you can say, oh, the product is too early. You need also, to take into the consideration what is exactly needed, what are, the pain points, and then, maybe to deliver what you think will help, right? So it's not like just saying, Simas, here is headache painkiller, right? And you will say, yes, I don't need it, my head doesn't hurt. And they will say, no, you don't know it yet, like, yes. So something like that.
Talking about painkillers and what's needed, what's not needed, how do you think? So what is the successful recipe to have that autonomy, at the same time have alignment? How to balance those two to get into the right place?
Again, it's maybe one of the recipes. Will repeat, right? I don't see that always you can say there is a silver bullet, to get it there. But I think exactly the recipe is still, even though you have the autonomous teams, still alignment and a bit of the maybe best practices sharing and other things need to come across all those teams. So it's not necessarily as a must with every team member. It's more like about the organization to realize how to ensure that part. In some organizations, it might mean, maybe at the technical lead or engineering manager or like similar level, right? Sometimes it is being brought into the different layers, maybe one administrative layer, still a bit of the aligning, right, within engineering teams and product teams. And at the technical level, maybe your lead engineer, staff engineers, principal engineers of the different team still also agree and have some, synchronization layer, which provides a bit of the, let's say, umbrella alignment, right? So to some extent, I will not be maybe much criticized for that, saying that I still believe in autonomy within a bit of the defined perimeter, right? So it's not necessarily saying, autonomy is, from completely there to there, but it's more a bit about the guidelines and some of the perimeter agreement, which needs to come across all the organization, and then defining that autonomy level. So it doesn't sound maybe very, again, attractive, a bit of the regulated or coordinated autonomy. But again, it's not like, breaching the will for teams to be autonomous, but it's a bit more like, just saying, let's organize our autonomy, right? So autonomy doesn't mean house, right? So autonomy is a bit in the organizational layout. So that's maybe the part. And if autonomy looks like house, I think it's already like a bit of the planning to fail, at some point, right? Maybe not in the stage A, but most likely later, that will still pop up, right? And it will be also backfiring. And again, what is the risk appetite of the company, right? Do we want also to learn everything by our mistakes? And it might be the path maybe. And another part is, do we want maybe to avoid some of the things, coming, which you can avoid if you invest a bit more time before it comes. Again.
But failure is fine, probably depending on the level of the failure. Not every time failure is nice. If we're losing huge amounts of money or, I don't know, backfiring us a lot, then that's not nice. And once you said about alignment, autonomy needs some kind of structures or perimeter, what came to my mind, it's like if you're on a survival trip, camping or whatever, within a, I don't know, group of people, within your friends, you still need some kind of agreement. How is our structure looking, what we're going to do, who's building and responsible for the camp, who's hunting for the food, and so on and so forth, how that will look like. So it brings some kind of structure, perimeter for survival, actually. But at the same time, you have a chances to do the work as you wish until we are agreed what's the final look, where we will eat, where we will sleep, how it will look like. So I think that's what I'm saying, that within the natural world, even though we are enabled to be the decision makers every time, everywhere, outside of working environment, there are still some factors that we need to think of and to align with others, because else it's really chaos.
So it's more like also being mindful about the ones around you, right? So be it teams or be it individuals, right? So even like that survival, like, camp or whatever, like example you use, right? So if someone just comes and says, I don't need to bring anything, right? I'm just like looking for the good time and I was expecting others will take care of everything, right? So that's, I think that is exactly that negative side, right? There. However, as long as every single of us, individual, let's say members, right? And bodies will also think not about himself, herself, but wider, right? And you also will think, what do I need to do in order, also maybe to be useful, or maybe I will be impacting you. And I will be mindful about that, and I will be also responsible and accountable there. Then it will be exactly that ingredient for success.
And that's very well said. It's not about us, but it's as well about our awareness about the environment we're in.
Yeah, that we are not in vacuum. We are still also interconnected, even though we might think differently, right? But we still impact, each other. Teams impact, each other, and so on. So, and it's exactly about that. Positiveness and alignment.
You shared a lot of different perspectives and angles, and you as well shared what's the successful recipe. It's not that straightforward and simple to have it in place. And probably the awareness and understanding where you are might help you to reach the goal that you're reaching for, as well within the autonomy. Even though it sounds like a very sexy term and everyone wants it, it might sometimes hurt, and at least be aware about these cases and don't lose that.
Yeah, I hope, exactly. To be mindful about what it can backfire you, right? So it's not only about that, only the positive things, but it's also a bit more realistic and alignment there. Hopefully, it can lead everyone, maybe of course paving their own path into that autonomy journey. However, it means, it has also some straight turns, and then maybe sharp corners and other things. So it will not be just, highway to paradise. It will be a bit of a bumpy road, but yeah, definitely it's the direction.
Thank you, Jovirdas, so much for sharing your experience. And within this time, it was really nice to chat with you as always. Hopefully,
thank you, Simon. Also,
it's time to modernize without disruption. It's time to solve the most complex IT challenges. Time to meet the evolving needs of the market. It's time for Rocket Software.